Welcome to Insight Meditation Community of Charlotte. I'm Clyde. I'll be your Dharma leader tonight. If you don't have your video on and you want to turn it on for just a moment to see all who's here tonight, let's take a moment to do that. I'm glad everybody's here. Tonight we're going to be looking at we're going to be ending our series on the 3 characteristics of existence. And a couple of weeks ago, Alexis talked about impermanence, and it's a Nietzsche, and how everything is arising and passing away. All phenomena is rising and passing away. And then last week, Alexis talked about dukkha, suffering. That idea that when we actually try to attach to something that's arising and passing away, something that's impermanent, and we try to hold on to it or cling to it, we're going to create suffering in our lives. So tonight we're going to be talking about anatta or not self. Now, anatta is one of the most unique teachings of the Buddha. It's one of his most important teachings. And it's also one of the most challenging to comprehend. It's also kind of one of the advanced teachings and practices that the Buddha taught. It's really a gradual. It's one of the, like I said, it's an advanced training, advanced teaching. So it's kind of like one things you want to kind of hold lightly here. And the reason it's taught this way, Bhikkhu Bodhi says that in the suttas, when he's trying to explain not self, the formula uses the characteristic of impermanence to reveal the characteristic of suffering, and both together to reveal the characteristic of not self. The suttas take this indirect route to the characteristic of not self because the selfless nature of things is so subtle that often it cannot be seen except when pointed to by the other 2 characteristics. So hold these, as Ward said, when he did the introduction to this series, he says, there's some things the Buddha taught, you kind of have to just kind of like, okay, I got that. Some things you can get a hold of, okay, I can really understand that. And then as we start to work with it and it becomes a part of us, we kind of get deeper and deeper into it. So this is one of those we kind of want like, okay, let's see how this works and kind of hold it, because it is to a certain degree counterintuitive to our lived experience. And I'll explain why it's that way. So anatta is, and I'm using the translation of not self. And I want to say, starting out, that this what I'm talking about tonight is kind of my interpretation, my view of anatta, based on what I've read and studied. They caution you not to use the translation of no self. No self implies a negation of a self. And this is why it's kind of hard to comprehend. The Buddha never said there is no self. When he was asked directly, is there a self? Is there a no self? He refused to answer. The reason he did this was because the Buddha taught suffering and the end of suffering. And he wanted to teach things that would be beneficial as you worked with this, as you worked to reduce your suffering. And he had like 4 ways that he would answer questions. And the 4th way was, if he felt like the answer would not be, or an explanation would not be beneficial or useful, he just didn't answer it. And this is one of the ones where when they asked him, is there a self, is there no self? He didn't answer it. There was a lot of discussions around this at that time that was going on, and you can read about that if you want to. But he said not, and he explained to Anato, his assistant, later on why he didn't answer it. But he just, the idea being that it's not going to be beneficial. And if you get into this, if you find yourself getting into that, the Buddha even said, you'll get into a thicket of thieves, a fetter of views, a better of views, a thicket of views. And so know that it could get complicated. So what is not self then? What is it? It's a construct. It's a doctrine. It's a concept. It's a characteristic. Um, and it's kind of pretty simple. In the teachings is that it says that there is no permanent, fixed, solid, unchanging self. That the more you investigate, as more we try to see the way things are, you will not find a permanent, fixed, solid self. Everything, just like in permanence, everything is conditioned, and the self is the same way. Joseph Goldstein writes, what we call self is actually a process made up of many elements, all of them in continual flux. The Buddha referred to it as actions without an actor, doings without a doer. Another writer says, Buddhism views everything as anatta, due to no real essence in all things. They arise because they are conditioned. They change and cease because the conditions change and cease. In the Abhidhamma analysis by the early Buddhism, self is simply a continuous stream of energy and action, like the continuous flowing of a river or the continuous burning of a flame. The Buddha said, it is when one knows and sees that thus, that in regard to this body with its consciousness and all external signs, there is no I-making, mind-making, or underlying tendency to conceit of self. And Guy Armstrong, in his book on emptiness, he writes, note that the Buddha expresses this in terms of verbs. There's no I-making or my-making. This makes it clear that the sense of self is not intrinsic to human experience, but is being generated by us moment after moment through our mental activity when we are not seeing with proper wisdom. We engage in I-making when we take the I to be something, and we engage in my-making when we take something to be mine. Together, we could call I-making and my-making the activity of selfing. So that's one way of doing this, is going, we're selfing. It's a verb, it's a process, it's an activity. Now, this is why this is kind of hard to go on. Well, this is process, it's going on. However, the teachings do not deny this idea of an impermanent, ever-changing sense of self. They never said that the sense of self is this inconstant, this impermanent sense of self. It didn't deny that. It said there's no fixed self, but there is a continuous, this constant changing sense of self. And this is what we work with, is this idea of a sense of self, this conditioned sense of self. And this is what helped me in working with this and studying this, because like I said, not self, the concept, the experience of it is very much an advanced teaching. But I'm sitting here going, well, who's meditating? I'm meditating. I ate. I'm sitting here. This is my body. What am I doing? We work with this. Tiramisu Biko says, that is to have a sense of self, a healthy sense of self, is an important part of the practice. It encourages responsibility, heedfulness, and care. It provides motivation, persistence, and strength. So a healthy, skillful sense of self is not denied by the teachings. So how do we do this? Where do we get this healthy sense of self, and what do we do with it? This is what was new learning for me. Was here we look at the teachings. What's one of the first things the Buddha taught? He taught generosity. He said, I'll be happy. I'll feel good when I think about giving. I'll feel good when I give, and I'll feel good after I've given. So there's a sense of this healthy, this skillful sense of self. We look at metta, loving kindness meditation. I want to be healthy. I want to be happy. I want to live with ease, just like I want everybody else to. There's this development of this sense of a sense of metta, this being of metta, loving kindness toward others, equanimity, compassion, and sympathetic joy. Also, as we develop these traits within ourselves, we're developing a skillful sense of self, a temporary and constant sense of self. And the reason this, and so then we keep going on. What's right view say? In right view, the very first step in the Noble Eightfold Path, which is addresses the idea of karma. The karma. If I act with skillful intentions, I will have less suffering. If I act with unskillful intentions, I'm going to create more suffering. This is important. There's a sense of agency there. I'm doing this. I can do this. I'm not just living out of fate somewhere. I can make a decision. I can act skillfully or unskillfully. That was important to the Buddhist whole concept of Buddhist teaching, that we do have some agency here. And there's an I, there's a sense of self I that can do this. It's a healthy sense of self. If we move on, and it's on a, and then the karma is more of like we call it a mundane teaching. We're doing with this conditioned sense of self. We keep on going right intention. The idea of developing goodwill, harmlessness. Then we get into, what do we get into? We get into the ethical teachings, see the right speech. We get into right action, where we don't take lives, we don't lie, and we don't do sexual misconduct. And we have right livelihood. These are our ethical teachings. This is sila. This is along the path. As we go along here, we're developing a skillful, useful sense of self, knowing that it's impermanent, knowing that it's arising and passing away. Now, one thing that I failed to mention is that it happens so quickly. It happens, this sense of self comes and goes so quickly that we take it to be fixed. That's why this is an advanced teaching. Then if we keep on going down the path, this is where we really start. When we get into this idea of right effort, we start working with the mind. What's a wholesome thought? How do I develop wholesome thoughts versus unwholesome thoughts, and what I do with them? I'm doing this, someone's doing this, I'm developing this skill. But if we've gotten into this kind of mental area here, and so we're starting to get into this using, we're starting to using this conditioned self, we're getting toward the unconditioned. Then we get to the biggie. We get to right mindfulness. And in right mindfulness, this is described in the Satipatthana Sutta. And in there we get into the body and the body, feeling, tone, mind states, and the dharmas. Well, in the refrain to the Satipatthana Sutta, it gives you this information. There's a refrain, and it's in the Satipatthana Sutta like 17 times. You hear the same thing over and over and over. And the first part of it is about impermanence, which is directs us to that. But then there's this sentence: and she abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. And Analayo, in the Satipatthana, in his book, The Satipatthana, The Direct Path to Realization, writes, this instruction points to the need to observe objectively without getting lost in associations and reactions. According to the commentaries, this refers in particular to avoiding any form of identification. Freedom from identification then enables one to regard any aspect of one's subjective experience as a mere phenomena, free from any type of self-image or attachment. So he's really pointing us to this, this is where we're headed. This is where we're going to have no self-image and no attachment. And then if we look at each one of these, we start out with the body, the first part of the part of the Satipatthana. We're looking at the body. And this is where we work with this a little bit. When we sit with the body and we look at it, we have a pain somewhere in our body when we're doing our meditation. Sometimes we look and lay it and we could go into it. Well, there's a sensation. It's a warm sensation. That's a different way of looking at this. That's my knee and it's hurting. You see the difference? It's a warm sensation. It's a sensation. It's a rising and passing away. Let me see what this is like. I can be with this. I'm not owning. I'm not making it mine. So you work with this a little bit. Try not to breathe. Can you control that? Try not to grow old. Try not to get sick. If there was an eye here that could control all that, we would see it. And he breaks it all down and goes, keep looking and see if you can find it. See if you can find this somewhere. So we work with our body this way. We go to, when we get to feeling tone, it's more, it happens without us doing it. We get into mind states. The next one is mind states. That's where we're sitting in meditation. We watch the rising and passing away of these mind states. I forgot one with the body, one you do the body. Hunger arises, is here in the body. You know, you can't tell it to go. You can tell it to wait a little bit, but you can't tell it to go away or not get hungry. It's going to get hungry. Mind states. I do this when I work with a little bit in mind states. If you're sitting in meditation, if you sit in meditation, you notice thoughts arise. Who thought that? Who sat there? I didn't sit there and start thinking about this. It just came up from somewhere. And that's what he's telling us to look at. He's telling us to look at this. So where did this come from? Who thought that? Where did it come from? We start looking at these mind states. We see them arising and passing away. We see our clinging to them, causing suffering. Then we say, well, where do they come from? Where are these mind states? Pointing that we're not going to cling to these. Then we get into the Dhammas, and this, he really directs us to, there's a couple in there that he directs us to, that he gets really into the idea of not self. And the first one, the big one is the 5 aggregates of clinging. And I don't want to get into a talk on the 5 aggregates of clinging, but when he gets in, he talks each one of these. If you look at this, it's not permanent, it's unsatisfactory, and there's nothing there. The other one is one I talked about a few weeks ago. It's the sense contact. There's an eye, there's a sense organ, there's an object out there. It happens. Contact occurs. There's seeing. That happens without an I being there, without a me being there, without me owning that. And so I can play with that a little bit. So so he, in the Satipatthana, he's pointing us, we're getting deeper and deeper. These are advanced practices. In fact, Analayo in his book says, by letting go of all dependencies and cravings during this advanced level of practice, a deepening realization of the empty nature of all phenomena dawns on the meditator. With this state of independence and equipoise, characterized by the absence of any sense of I or mine, the direct path of Satipatthana gradually approaches its culmination. It is in this balanced state of mind, free from I-making or mine-making, that the realization of Nibbana can take place. So this is advanced teachings about this. But what we're doing, we're using this conditioned sense of self on the path to eventually get to this unconditioned state. And I want to make a comment about, we still have one more step on the path, concentration. I think concentration here does a couple things. The first one is described by Rodney Smith in his book, Stepping Out of Self-Deception. He writes, discerning the difference between thinking about something and directly experiencing it is the function of concentration. through the quiet, abiding attention of concentration, we see clearly how the self comes into being through the commentary we infuse and the narrative we create. I said earlier that this sense of this impermanent sense of self is happening so quickly that we take it to be permanent. As we get into these deep states of concentration, our mind starts to slow down, and we can begin to see where we're attaching to these things as it rises up, makes this is mine. And that's why we see these stories we add to create this. The second function I think that deep concentration provides is this, it gives us a chance it gives us a safe place to experience this idea of not self. This is, like I said, this is kind of an advanced teaching. It's an advanced practice. And if you get this far, you need to be with a good teacher when you do this, because we can't just say, I'm not self. That's not psychologically stable. That's why we use this sense of this conditioned sense of self to get to this. So it gives us a chance to be able to be in meditation, be in that place, see where we can begin to let go of these sense of self. We start to let go. And this goes back to the second noble truth, clinging. We begin to start let go of this sense of self. And this gets us into this more unconditioned place. I haven't been there, so I can't tell you about it. But that's the idea. So we have our teachings. The path teaches us this. So we can tip into this idea of sense of self. We can work with it some, but Tiramisu Bhikkhu says, whenever you see yourself identifying with anything stressful and inconstant, remind yourself that it's not self, not worth clinging to, not worth calling yourself. So this, like I said, this is kind of an advanced teaching. It's one that you can work with, that we work with kind of briefly. We are, and the idea here is anatta is not self. There's no fixed, permanent, unchanging self or unconditioned self. And the path teaches us to try to, what's Vipassana? Seeing clearly, come and see. He's saying, come and see. Here's the practice. See if you can find this. It does not deny this idea of an impermanent, inconstant, changing sense of self that's being created moment by moment by moment. And what the path is telling us is to use this conditioned sense of self to support us on our practice, to work with our practice, to use the practice, to do the practice as we work from this idea of being this conditioned sense of self as we get to the unconditioned. Thank you. Now, if anybody has any questions, don't be surprised if I pull the Buddha and say that's not good for your long-term happiness and I don't answer it, but I'll see what I can do. You can do it either through the chat function, or if you raise your hand, I can unmute you. And yeah, thank you. don't, like I said, the Buddha said this is, this was, it was advanced teaching, and he said, if you get caught up in it, just remember, if you get caught up in it yourself, thinking about this, just say, okay, wait a minute, let me hold this, and um, don't get caught up in that thicket of views, because it's not going to lead to your long-term happiness. And even Tiramisu Bhikkhu says, don't think of no self or not self or anything like this. Think in terms of, what can I do for my long-term happiness and well-being? But there's an I in there doing that, so we don't get caught up in this not self. All right. I'll give a couple more minutes and I'll read the announcements. I think. And we use impermanence. We use the idea of this suffering. We see if we start clinging to this sense of self, just like if we cling to a permanent sense of self, we're going to create suffering. And that's why it's taught in this way. I'll do the announcements very quickly. There's the winter book discussion, I believe, is still going on. And I believe it's one of these things where you don't have to read the book at the beginning. You can drop in at any time. So contact Joy. Her information is on the website. There's a meditation pop-up group that's meeting on March the 27th at Boyce Park. I believe that's a Saturday. The Spring Beyond the Basic series, the Buddha's Middle Way, will be led by Ward. That starts on April the 6th. April the 6th, I believe, which is a Tuesday night for 4 weeks. You can get information on that on the website. I believe on April the 7th, we will have a guest speaker. Will be Philip Moffat, who is a well-known Dharma teacher. He'll be leading on that Wednesday night. I think we may be meeting early, like at 7 o'clock that night. I'm not sure. We'd like to give him some more time to do, because he's a nationally known speaker. On May the 19th is the Farther Way. David Chernikoff will be speaking on a Wednesday night, and he'll also be doing a day long on May the 22nd. So all that information will be on the website. Just letting everybody know that we're no longer doing the 7 o'clock instruction period. There's a video out there on the website that has these instructions. We will be doing a live Zoom instruction period the last Wednesday night of the month. So, anybody that's interested and wants the live instructions, that'll be on the last Wednesday of the month. And obviously, and then the Dharma leaders' emails are out there. If anybody needs information, instructions, let us know. I think that's the website. I think that's any other announcements, non-related announcements, and then raise your hand or let me know. And then if you get a chance to, if you want to fill, we do still collect donations over the website. Let me go back and look at some of these and see. We could have said self emerges and depending on one's level of identification attachment. Yeah, I think I think it's going to emerge. It's going to keep coming up because we're going to attach. It's going to happen so quickly. We're going to attach to things. And we're going to identify, because we aren't at the spot of not identifying and not attaching. It happens quickly. We're going to do it. It's going to continue. So I think it's going to continue on now, because here we're getting at a spot. The Buddha he still operated, even when he being awakened, he operated with a self, this sense of self, this what we call kind of the mundane sense of self. He still operated with a body, with this sense of self. He didn't attach to it. He didn't cling to it. He even saw with wisdom. And wisdom is the one thing that this whole path is going for, because ignorance is the one thing that causes our suffering to happen. Yeah, don't, yeah, and it's okay. You'll just take in what you can tonight. Let's see that total not. I think not self. I think you do well. I think when you get into a total non-attachment would be, if you can get to that point, that would be almost nirvana. I think you're getting into this idea of the unconditioned and what that means and how to explain it. I think that's one of those questions. It's like, well, just wait till you get there and see what it is. But it is the whole. I mean, if you go back, what Elaine is pointing to there is the first noble, is not the second noble truth. Is the second and third noble truth. The cause of suffering is clinging, if you like, and what we do is the path is to not cling. And how do we not do that? And that's the path. It's a good. Thank you for letting know about Philip. I know this is an unusual, it's a difficult subject. But for me, when I was working with this, how am I going to, it gives me the sense of self that I can develop a skillful sense of self and still be on the path and not have to really worry about this not self, knowing that this is impermanent, that this is the way it is. That is an advanced practice and advanced teaching, but you can begin to see some of that. You can begin to touch into this at different points. And the more deeper states of meditation, the more you meditate, the more you'll be able to maybe touch into it some more. And to get to that point of letting go. We talk about letting go in here so much, letting go. It's kind of, and as Analio said, that last thing, no more I making or mind making. No more announcement. Do we have any other announcement? Any other non-announcements, IMCC announcement? Okay. Then we will do some. We'll do some metta. We'll develop this healthy, skillful sense of self with some metta. So come into your relaxed position. We don't have to be quite as rigid as supposed to be when we do our meditation. We want to relax. Breathe in, breathe out, close your eyes. Think of some people that you would like to just for the group to send metta to. You may say those to yourself, say it out loud here, so it comes through. It won't come through, but it'll be in the air. And let's begin by sending some metta to ourselves. You may use phrases that you normally use, or you repeat to yourself the phrases that I come up with. May I be safe and protected. May I be healthy and strong. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I live with joy and ease. Now bring to mind someone else that you would like to send this loving kindness to, this metta. We want to include all those that are in the Sangha. May you be safe and protected. May you be healthy and strong. May you be filled with loving kindness. May you live with joy and ease. Now let's direct our loving kindness to all beings in the world. May all beings be safe and protected. May all beings be healthy and strong. May all beings be filled with loving kindness. May all beings live with joy and ease. May any benefit that we receive from tonight's practice be for the liberation of all beings. May all beings be free.